Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today is another episode of NBA Trade Machine, with this one focusing on Kevin Love. And there was a headline that came out last week essentially saying that the Cavs are now ready to listen to offers for their former All-Star forward. And it seems like this is probably the most likely player to get traded before the deadline, given Love's contract situation, as well as where the Cavs are as a team, in addition to the fact that there's a lot of teams around the league that I think would really benefit from a Kevin Love trade. So there's a lot of possibilities here. Let's go ahead and get into them. First up, Jorge says that the Timberwolves would receive Kevin Love and Jordan Clarkson in exchange for Gorgui Dieng, Jeff Teague, Josh Okogie, and a first and second round pick. He says, send Love back to where it all started. Plus, they get great depth with Clarkson, the Cavs get cap relief, the assets here might be too much, but the Cavs should pull the trigger. So my first thought here is this would make a lot of sense for a team like Minnesota, assuming they want to push for a playoff spot this season and really try and be good right now. Love would provide them more scoring and shooting in the front court, another borderline all-star caliber player. Even at this relatively advanced stage of his career, Love is still a really good player that could certainly help this team. However, I think it's pretty unlikely that he ends up getting traded back to Minnesota after being traded from there to Cleveland when LeBron first came back to Cleveland. But just looking at the trade itself from the Timberwolves' perspective, I think it makes a good amount of sense. They'd be giving up Dieng, who is a front court rotation player for them, but is still on a pretty big contract this year as well as next. Jeff Teague, who's an expiring contract as a point guard that's already been moved to the bench for this season. Okogie is a really good, at least interesting young player moving forward as a defender, needs some help, needs some development offensively still. He's a good asset, but something I think you can get used to parting with in a Kevin Love trade. And then you've got the first and the second round picks as well. So on the surface, that's a lot of value, but really two of them are essentially cap relief stuff. I mean, Jeff Teague is still a good player at this point, but not a huge part of this team's plans. He's an expiring contract that allows the money to work. Dieng is someone that you could kind of talk yourself into being a salary dump guy at this point, just in terms of his contract number as well as how he's playing. And then, like I said, Okogie, you really wouldn't want to part with him, but in this scenario, I think it's okay. The picks would have to be protected, like the first round pick would have to be lottery protected for 2021. But in general, I think this is pretty good value because you're not only giving Love, but you're also getting Jordan Clarkson. You can say what you want about him in terms of his play on the court, but he would at least help alleviate some of the concerns about the amount of depth that the Timberwolves would be giving up here. So if I'm Cleveland, I would say yes to this. I like the pick. I like Okogie. I like the salary cap relief. And if I'm the Timberwolves, assuming my plan is to push for the playoffs and add another piece to this core group, I would say yes. If I have more of a longer term view on this roster, then I would not, and I would look into moving Jeff Teague to a different team in exchange for his expiring contract. So assuming that the Timberwolves are willing to push for a playoff spot and sacrifice a little bit of future flexibility, this makes sense for them as well. Next up now is a trade that I came up with, and it's Kevin Love going to the Miami Heat in exchange for Justice Winslow and James Johnson. Okay, first up, let's talk about this for the Heat, because I think a lot of people are going to look at this and wonder why Justice Winslow is in this deal. And there's a couple of reasons. One, I'm not convinced that the fit between him and Jimmy Butler is going to be outstanding. I like Justice Winslow as a player, but I think he's someone that needs the basketball a good amount to be as effective as possible. He's still not a great off-ball player on the offensive end, and that can cause some issues. On the other hand, for the Heat, he's just not really been all that healthy for them over the last couple of seasons. He's missed games already this year, so it would make sense to trade in him as well as James Johnson, who's an expiring contract for next year, assuming he opts into his player option, for a player in Kevin Love that's going to give them shooting and spacing in the front court. This is a win-now move for Miami because Winslow is still on a pretty good contract for the next couple of seasons. He's still just 23, but when you're looking at the two assets in terms of right now, Love is a better player. Winslow's had some injury issues, and the fit is questionable between him and Jimmy Butler. So why not take a ball handler away? You already have guys like Jimmy Butler. You already have guys like Goran Dragic. You need someone that can shoot off the ball, that can score a little bit for you in the front court, which is what Kevin Love can provide, and Justice Winslow really can't. For Cleveland, I already talked about why I like Winslow. I think it would be another interesting piece to add to this core and another potential trade piece down the road, given how fair his contract is. And then you get James Johnson, who, like I said, won't be expiring this year, but will expire next year, which is a big deal because that's 2 years before Kevin Love's deal would run out. So on both sides of this, just given the situation of both of these teams, I think this would make a lot of sense. But if you're a Heat fan or just someone looking at this trade in general and you're saying, I don't want to trade Justice Winslow, I completely understand that. I'm just making an argument as to why it could make sense given his injury history and his fit on this current team. Moving on now, Israeli NBA fan says the Cavaliers would receive Miles Turner and Doug McDermott in exchange for Kevin Love. So this is another relatively common trade destination for Kevin Love because the Pacers have two players in the front court in Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner that don't fit super well together, and Love would be a guy that could potentially remedy that for them if they're willing to part with one of those younger big guys. In this case, it's Turner in addition to the off-ball shooting of Doug McDermott. They're getting a player in Kevin Love that's going to be able to shoot off the ball, is going to be able to score inside, is going to fit better alongside Sabonis, in my opinion, than Miles Turner does currently. Now, I could definitely see an argument of Turner being a much better defensive player and someone that can still space the floor a little bit, being a good fit alongside Sabonis, but I'm not convinced that that's the case, and I would like to see those two guys split up. So for Indiana, it adds another borderline all-star caliber player to their roster, a roster that increasingly looks really, really dangerous once Victor Oladipo comes back. So something to keep an eye on there in Indiana. On the other side of this, Cleveland will be getting a nice young big man. They don't really have a promising young big on the roster. They have Larry Nance, but Miles Turner would immediately be the best and most promising young big man on their roster, and then McDermott is an off-ball shooter that you could potentially flip later on if you wanted to. So essentially this boils down to Miles Turner for Kevin Love. The Cavs want a bit more of a younger player that fits their timeline, and Indiana might be more interested in a better fit as well as a player that will help them win right now. So again, another nice win-win trade and one that I like. Next up is another trade that I came up with, and it's Hassan Whiteside, Nasir Little, Gary Trent Jr., and a lottery-protected first-round pick in 2020 from the Trailblazers going to Cleveland in exchange for Kevin Love. Okay, so if you've looked at any kind of trade machines throughout this entire season, you'd probably know that this was coming for Kevin Love. Portland is one of the most likely destinations, in my opinion, to get Kevin Love in a trade or to make a trade in general because they have the big expiring contracts to make really any salary work, between Hassan Whiteside's big expiring that you see in this trade, as well as Kent Bazemore's, which is over $19 million. In this scenario, they're getting all of the Kevin Love stuff that I've talked about with every other team. The front court scoring, the front court spacing. This team specifically needs that more than a lot of other teams do around the league, at least a lot of the other good ones, because they have almost all of their scoring is consolidated in their backcourt, at least until Jusuf Nurkic comes back. They're really struggling to find scoring in the front court apart from Carmelo Anthony, who they had to pick up out of necessity. So Kevin Love helps remedy a lot of those things. In terms of what they're giving up, Whiteside's not a huge loss. I mean, it's a big expiring contract. He's not playing extremely well for them. And once Nurkic comes back, he probably won't be playing that much anyway. And then once Zach Collins comes back, he probably won't be playing that much, like I said. So not a huge loss there. Nasir Little is a young player that they just picked in the first round that could be good down the road, but this is a kind of move that you make to consolidate some younger assets. If you really think that this can help you push towards one of the better seeds in the Western Conference and turn around your season, it makes sense to consolidate some borderline good younger assets. Gary Trent Jr. falls in that category as well. I put him in here just as a little bit more incentive for the Cleveland Cavaliers to take this deal. Then you've got the lottery protected first round pick as well. So for the Cavs, you're getting salary cap relief. You're getting 3 young assets that aren't great individually, but collectively one of them could turn out to be pretty good, or they all could turn out to be pretty good. And this would be a pretty nice haul for them in exchange for Kevin Love, while Portland's getting the best player in the deal and someone that is a borderline all-star when healthy and provides them everything that they need. So this would be a good trade, in my opinion, for both teams. Again, assuming Portland is thinking that this is something that they can turn around this season and be one of the better teams in the Western Conference with the correct moves, and this would be one of them. And last up now, we have a trade from Michael, in which the Cavaliers received Tyler Johnson, Dario Saric, Ty Jerome, and a first-round pick in exchange for Kevin Love. He says the Suns get another great scorer to round out their lineup, and the Cavs get 2 young pieces, a first and Tyler Johnson's expiring. So this is a very, very similar structure to what we just talked about with the Trailblazers. Phoenix has been sliding a little bit over the last 10 or so games. Ever since Aaron Baines went out with injury, they're still waiting on DeAndre Ayton to come back. Their backcourt players are still playing pretty well, but their front court is definitely continuing to be an issue. And this is a team that I would imagine probably wants to try and get that 8th seed in the West just to say that they're actually a good team for the first time in a while. It'd be a huge, huge deal for Phoenix to make the playoffs after being so bad for the last 4 seasons, and getting Kevin Love would definitely help them do that. He would immediately replace Saric at the 4 spot in the starting lineup, provide a ton of spacing, and once DeAndre Ayton comes back, that'd be a really nice front court to go along with the Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre, Devin Booker backcourt / wings that they're dealing with right now, and that would be a really nice starting lineup, again, once Ayton comes back. In terms of what they're giving up, the Tyler Johnson expiring isn't a huge deal, though they would have to make a separate move, in my opinion, to shore up their backup point guard spot, because he's kind of been that for them so far, and so they're going to need to replace that in some way. You're giving up Saric, who again I continue to hold out hope for, but I don't really know that he's going to end up being what I want him to at this point as a playmaking four, but still a good young player that is on an expiring contract and will need a new one in the offseason, which is something to consider for Cleveland. Ty Jerome was a first-round pick this past year and someone that I think is going to be pretty good down the road, and then a first-round pick as well. So collectively, not as good of a package, in my opinion, as what Portland is offering in the previous deal, but still, if that offer isn't on the table, this would be another interesting one to look at, depending on your opinion of Saric, Jerome, and then the first-round pick as well. There would have to be a lottery protection on that first-round pick, because things could always go pretty badly over the next couple of seasons for Phoenix, and then suddenly they're bottoming out and they don't have their own pick in 2023. So that would be a consideration for Cleveland, as well as the fact that Dario Saric would need a new contract. But again, this looks like a pretty good win-win. My only issue is with this, as well as the Timberwolves and Portland throughout this video, is it just depends on whether or not the franchise wants to kind of not go all in, but consolidate some of their future assets to be better this year and next year, while Kevin Love is still a borderline all-star caliber player. From a long-range view, none of those teams are going to be championship contenders this season, in my opinion, with a Kevin Love trade, so it doesn't make a ton of sense to consolidate future assets. But if they just want to be good this year and next, and at the cost of some of their future assets, then it makes sense. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.